Hello, welcome. This is the third video in our series where you can learn how to build courage from chaos and live your best life. I'm Vanessa Wideski, and I'm here with Tom Campbell.
Hi, Vanessa. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, Tom. So today we're going to look at a basic overview of Tom's big theory of everything. Tom, your theory, it's based on two assumptions, right? Consciousness exists and evolution exists. Those are the two assumptions. Consciousness needs to evolve, and that's the whole point of our existence. It's chosen this strategy, the universe, as an opportunity for it to evolve. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? How did you come to those two assumptions?
Well, the way I came to those two assumptions, is this consciousness exists. I had to use that as an assumption because we cannot logically specify the origin of consciousness because we are consciousness. You know, that's who we are. We're pieces of consciousness, and we are constrained to be within this larger consciousness system. So to get outside of the system, to have a view of that system's beginnings is just something we cannot do. You know, it's logically impossible for a piece of a system. We're not even outside of the conscious system. We're not even defined. You know, what are we? Well, we're pieces of consciousness. Within a consciousness system, we exist and we can experience everything within that system. But we can't get out of that system to look at the origin of that system. So it's not that we don't know enough and that we'll figure it out one day. It's logically impossible for us to logically get to that point of the beginning of consciousness. So I start with the assumption that consciousness exists.
Can you because consciousness is kind of like a buzzword, like everybody's saying consciousness, consciousness. What is consciousness?
Consciousness is awareness that makes free will choices.
Okay. I like that definition. So consciousness is awareness that makes free will choices.
Yeah. Well, I could just say it's awareness that makes choices.
Okay.
Because if there are any choices,
they have to be
free will.
Right.
If there's no free will, then there are no choices.
Not a choice, yeah.
There's only a pretense of choice or an illusion of choice.
Right.
So it's awareness that can make choices.
Okay.
And the amount of choices that it can make, I define as a term called decision space. So a consciousness has a larger or smaller decision space. And decision space represents all of those choices that a consciousness knows about it, that they exist. So there may be 100 choices that it could make in a particular position, but it may only know of 10 of them. The other 90 are just not in their reality, right? They just haven't thought of those yet. Well, then those 10 represent their decision space, and they have the free will to pick one of those 10. That's free will. Free will doesn't mean you get whatever you want. For that, you need a genie and some magic.
Right.
This is science.
Yeah.
You don't get whatever you want. Free will doesn't mean that you don't have constraints.
Yeah.
You have plenty of constraints.
Okay.
But, so consciousness is not a real big leap of faith in that we all feel like we're conscious. You know, consciousness is obviously a thing, and evolution is not a great leap either because we all see things evolving. Not only we talk about our evolution in biology, but technology evolves. It builds on itself. Consciousness evolves by lowering its entropy.
Okay, so for people who are new to this, then I'm just going to get a better understanding of this and clarify it then, is that your model is based on two assumptions: consciousness exists and evolution exists. And consciousness needs to evolve in order to survive and grow and exist.
Right. Consciousness makes choices. So it can be in state 1 or state 2, state A or state B. So that's the simplest model we can make of consciousness. It's an awareness that knows it's in at least one of two states. So consciousness evolves by bringing order to chaos. Yeah. Any information system evolves by bringing order to chaos. We are consciousness. We've logged onto an avatar called a physical body, and we evolve by lowering entropy, by making choices toward a direction of love, caring, empathy. See, these are the things that lower entropy for the system.
Right.
Because what is the system? The system is a social system. It's a whole bunch of social, units of consciousness interacting with each other. And within a social system full of individuated units of consciousness, love is the force that creates order, optimizes resources. Fear is the thing that is very suboptimal.
Yes.
As it grows up and starts to optimize, something gets torn down, and it's only optimized for a small subset. Everybody else is beaten down to the bottom, right? And it's constantly who can climb up the ladder and who can kick them back down.
Yes.
It's going on all the time. So instead of being productive, they spend most of their time fighting with each other.
Yeah, that's inefficient.
Yeah, it's very inefficient. So that's then who we are.
Okay.
We are individuated units of consciousness.
Yeah.
We're here in this wonderful entropy reduction trainer to make choices such that we personally, for our individuated unit, and the larger system, because we're just pieces of the system, so as we grow up, it grows up. The system isn't done. It's learning and evolving just like we are.
Right.
And as we evolve, it evolves. And because as we evolve, it evolves, it would really like us to be successful. Because as we're not successful, we de-evolve, then that de-evolution produces less order. The fear side is very chaotic, less order.
Right.
As that side starts to dominate, then you have more and more chaos and less information, more and more randomness, and eventually you don't have an information system. The information system dies because it's back to randomness.
Right.
So the system wants to live. It's conscious, it's consciousness, and it would like to go on. So it needs us, its pieces, to make good choices. And it would be only to its own advantage to help us do that. And one way it helped us was to produce a nice entropy reduction trainer for us to make meaningful, significant, high impact choices. And other ways that can come in and nudge things this way or that way, of course, to help us, but it's not going to interfere with our free will.
Right.
Because free will is a given. If you don't have free will, then the result is meaningless.
Okay, so my understanding then is basically your model in a nutshell is saying that you've created this based on two assumptions. Consciousness exists, evolution exists. As consciousness, we need to evolve. And one of the strategies that we've chosen to do so is this reality frame, this virtual reality that we call our universe. And in order for us to evolve consciousness, we need to make choices that help us to be more efficient, more productive, more to work better, to improve.
You've got it. Now, I would like to say a little bit about how I arrived at these things.
Okay.
And I'd like to tell your audience that all of these things are metaphors.
Okay.
The larger consciousness system is a metaphor for the source.
Okay.
An individuated unit of consciousness is a metaphor for a chunk of the larger system that has free will. Okay, and so on. So these are metaphors. Don't think of these as more than metaphors.
Okay.
Don't turn them into material structures or things that are like material structures.
Right.
They're not. They're just metaphors that capture a functional element of the model. Now, the way I made the model is after working with Bob Monroe and then studying on my own, as we talked about last time, some 35 or so years later, I make a model. The way I made it was I said, here are all the facts I know about consciousness. So that's 35 years of exploring consciousness. And I'm a scientist, so when I explore it, it's not that, gee, that's nifty, and then go into the next thing. If I see something that looks like it's real, I have to be able to repeat it. I have to be able to find evidence for it.
Right.
And, so that's what takes so long. It takes a long time to know that what you that your model is not just something you're making up, that your model is something, it's a structure outside of you that explains things.
Right.
So I had all of this stuff about consciousness, and I had to draw a line through it. What explains all of these? Because if I come up with something that explains this little bit, and something explains that little bit, and something explains this little bit, that's not a model. Well, it's a whole bunch of little models, but none of them are the big model that explains everything.
Right, the
So I needed the one set of understandings that would explain everything I knew about consciousness in a simple way. No assumptions, just some logic is all you needed. So then I also had on the other side all this physics. And I'm a physicist, and I worked 35 years doing physics, and I became a consultant and did more physics. But in any case, that has a lot of points and things that I know. All the experiments that have ever been done kind of define what reality's like, what truth is. So I need to have the same understanding explain all of that stuff too. So I looked at both sides, everything I learned, all the facts of consciousness, all the facts of this virtual reality, this physical universe that I know, and come up with a simple explanation that would explain all of it. So as I did, I'm following, I knew consciousness. One of my facts was that consciousness is fundamental. And I got there because I could do things in consciousness that change things here in the physical world.
Right.
But I couldn't do anything in the physical world that changed the world of consciousness. So conscious has to be primary. Physical world, secondary. It's the super system in consciousness, the subsystem with the physical reality. So I needed to start with the consciousness model that would explain physics. So that was why I started writing all this down when I thought I kind of had an understanding of how it worked. And as I figured that out, I came to a whole bunch of aha moments, and one of them was, oh, it's just information, just like quantum mechanics was telling me. It's just information.
Right.
Consciousness is an information system. You see, that was one of them. Okay, so I had these aha moments, one of which was, consciousness is fundamental. And I had many others like that about consciousness. And then my understanding between consciousness and physics, how does the consciousness derive physics? That started to fall into place later.
Right.
I didn't get that first because I knew consciousness model had to be the primary model. From that model, I would be able to derive physics. So I wrote my books. Primarily these books were about consciousness. It's a consciousness model. And then some 3 or 4 years after I had published these books, I actually figured out the rest of it was how to apply it to derive science. I knew that science was in there someplace, but I really didn't know quite how to go about deriving it. But now I got that. That's the idea. I knew that consciousness was made up of pieces. So here we are, an individuated unit of consciousness is the piece. Okay, I got a fact. There's a metaphor for it. I knew that that this learning to become love was a hard thing because it wasn't an intellectual learning. It was a learning at the being level. It was a learning at the core. It's changing who you are. You can learn to act kind, but being kind is different. So I'm talking about change at the being level, not change at the behavior level. The behavior level is how you act. At the being level, your behavior is just an expression of who you are. Different. So to change yourself at the being level is not easy. Learning is not done in parallel. You can't go to first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade all at once and then go right into middle school or whatever. You have to do them one at a time. You have to learn the basics, then learn something a little better, then learn something a little more.
It's a cumulative.
It's a cumulative function. Learning is always more efficient as a serial process because you have to take it in steps. Once you learn this, then you can learn that. But try and learn this and that all at the same time doesn't work. So I knew it was going to have to be iterative. So I knew that these individuated units of consciousness were going to have to try through what I call an experience packet, or many would interpret as a lifetime. And then they were going to have to try again and try again. This wasn't something that could be expected to be learned by a fearful person on one go at it.
Yeah.
So I knew there was going to have to be a recycling of these experience packets over and over again. And each time, hopefully, you raise the quality of your consciousness, which is saying the same thing as decrease the entropy of your consciousness. Next time, you'd start at that
higher level,
that higher level, or that lower level of entropy, higher level of quality.
Yeah.
You'd start there.
Right.
And then hopefully you'd improve it again, and then you'd start there at a little better place. So it would be cumulative.
Okay.
And I knew that thing that accumulated, that whole thing with all of its accumulation wasn't going to be logged on to this avatar. Because otherwise, we would be here with knowledge of all those different
experience packets.
And we're not.
Yeah.
We don't, for the most part. So then I had the individual unit of consciousness put its own partition down, just partition off a part of it without memory, but just with quality, and let that log on. I call that a free will awareness unit.
That's why when we come here, it feels like we come here with a blank slate.
Yes, because we have to start without memory. If we had memory, we'd have, you've been around 10,000 times, you'd have 10,000 wives and husbands, some of both, right? Some wives, some husbands.
Right.
You'd have, 40 or 50,000 children.
Yeah, it would be too overwhelming.
It's way overwhelming.
Yeah.
Not only that, you bring in all the baggage,
the
specific fears that you've had, that baggage, instead of when you start over, you may have a proclivity for a certain amount of fear, but it's not specific yet.
Right.
It'll become specific as you tie it to experiences that you have here. So we want to start fresh. So I knew that was part of the model. So I have a free will awareness unit. So all of these things are just metaphors for functions of consciousness. And those are basically all the metaphors I needed. Larger conscious system, IUOC, individual unit of consciousness, free will awareness unit. And the rest of it, just chugs around that process. So that was pretty simple.
Yeah.
But that was a logical model.
In a nutshell, then, what I'm hearing you say is that we are consciousness. That's what we are. Our fundamental nature is consciousness. And you call kind of the big part of us the larger consciousness system. And in order for the larger consciousness system to grow and evolve, it's partitioned off pieces of itself, and you've called that individuated units of consciousness. And then those IUOCs have partitioned off another piece of themselves. You've called those free will awareness units.
Right.
And those free will awareness units have now logged on to this virtual reality we call the universe.
Making choices for avatars.
Okay, and when we make choices that come from fear, we regress. We make choices that come from love, we evolve. And we further our evolution as consciousness.
That's it. That's the basic model. So you see that model is made up of metaphors, each of those things. And it's simple. And it gives us purpose for why we're here, what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
It, if you follow it, you will find that your life goes from struggle to one of happiness. If you struggle against it, then you generally find a life full of stress. So it just works that way. It's so much easier to level up or win the game or lower your entropy or increase your quality if you understand the game you're playing.
Right, yes.
If you don't, if somebody just hands you a mouse or a joystick, loads a game and says, go level up. Yeah, you go, well, what's the game?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Right. It's like if somebody gave you a soccer ball and put you on a field, they're like, hey, go play soccer with these 12 other people, and you don't know what the rules are. You just kick the ball.
Not much you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
You're lost.
Yeah, you're lost.
So most people are wandering clueless on the playing field.
Yeah.
Have no idea what they're here for.
Right.
And because of that, life is hard. Because they're here for a purpose, and if they're not fulfilling that purpose, then they don't feel good about themselves. They don't feel good about what they're doing, and they get depressed. And then it takes us back to what you said earlier. We live in this material-based mindset with a belief in materialism, which basically says that, whoever can get to the top, they deserve to be there. And whoever doesn't get to the top, they deserve to be on the bottom. And that's just the way it is. And it's just natural for the rich to prey on the poor and for those in levels of power to manipulate the ones below them.
Yeah.
To do what you want.
Yeah,
that itself is not materialism, but that is a derivative of a sense of the only thing that matters is the material world.
Yeah.
Everything else is an hallucination.
Right.
So if you can fight your way to the top and get in control, well, then good for you.
Yeah, that's a result. That's a result of the philosophy that has been indoctrinated into us, which is why I'm so grateful that we have an alternative to materialism with this model that you're sharing with us.
So materialism doesn't make people be aggressive and greedy. It's just that in a material world, there are few constraints. Or there's really a material world really doesn't have a sense of morality. So materialists see morality as local. It's relative. Well, this is moral in this culture and it's immoral in another culture. So there is no real morality. It's just all relative. It doesn't mean anything. So it's local.
Exactly.
You say, well, if it's local, then that means in the big picture there really is no right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's just whatever a bunch of people decide what they want the rules to be in their own culture.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. You see, there is a right and wrong. It's defined at a higher level. And that is, does it lower entropy? Right. Does it raise entropy? Wrong. There's a good and bad, Is the process we call, good lowers entropy. Process we call bad raises entropy. So at a fundamental level, there is a right and wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that gives us then a moral compass. You see?
Yeah.
Whereas before, in a materialist world, you don't have that compass.
Right.
All you have is it's a kind of a free for all.
Yeah, every man for himself.
If these bunch of people want to decide that such and such is wonderful, and these people say, oh, such and such is terrible. Well, that's just people. They make up stuff, and you just have to live whatever the consensus is. It's not the case. See, that kind of lets people off the hook for being kind, for being generous, for being helpful, whereas this model says that being kind, generous, and helpful is central to your leveling up. If you don't level up, you're going to be unhappy and miserable. It doesn't matter if you have $1 billion in the bank. You're going to be unhappy and you're going to be miserable. And you could just as easily be, sitting on a stump watching your sheep graze and be happy and very functional. But you also could have $1 billion in the bank and be happy and be functional. You see, the success in the physical world is not related at all to the success in the larger world that actually matters, because that's our purpose here.
Yeah.
So it puts it gives direction, purpose, and a moral compass that is lacking in a system that's material-based and basically everybody for themselves. And if you have enough power, then you are defined as right and in charge. If you don't have any power, you're considered worthless and something that everybody can take your stuff if they want.
Right. So then what you're basically saying is that this life, this reality we're experiencing gives us opportunities, gives us all these kind of tests to make the right choice.
Right.
And love is the answer.
Love is the answer. That is the right choice. And again, not behaving as if you were loving, but being loved because you are love. So what is love? It's the state of no fear.
Okay.
When you don't have fear, you're love.
Right.
When you do have fear, then to the extent that you have fear, you don't have love. So even in the individual basis, people who have a whole lot of fear have a small capacity for love. even if they love all they can, and say, well, that's as much love as I got in there, it's small because they got a lot of fear.
So they have a small decision space. They can't make that many choices.
Yeah. So if you have a little bit of fear or almost no fear, then you can have a whole lot of love. So people, it's not that everybody has the potential. Well, everybody does have the potential to evolve.
Yeah.
Everybody has the potential to grow up to become love.
Yeah.
But everybody is not actualizing that potential. Most of us are way far away from actualizing our potential.
And that's because we don't know that that's what we're here to do.
Exactly.
Until now. Now we know.
Exactly.
So thank you so much, Tom, for taking the time to connect with me and with all of you. Thank you for tuning in with us. And make sure to join us again for our next video where we will talk more about Tom Campbell's My Big Theory of Everything and how that impacts us and the world that we live in.